national development plan bi plan la bi nga xam ne nii pour plan yi réew mi la naka la ñooy def develop réew mi plan bii nii doomi réew bu nekk yaa ngi si am walla NDP bi lu ma mën a gis mooy ma commencé si yoon yi boori Passamance fale léegi nañ fa ay yoon modern roads yoon yi nga xam ne nii yoon yu baax nañ te léegi coono dem di taxaw wala dem di am naka comme problème loolu yëpp léegi mun naa wax ne passé na school yi ñu ngi leen ay tabax lii NDP bi ku nekk moo war a taxaw gis ne lii ñun ñoo ko moom ku nekk dafa war a jël ownership ne lii man maa ko moom access to water ndox tamit war nañ ko mun a am gis na ñu ngi am ay bohol ñu ngi am ay ndox lii yëpp mu ngi ñëw fii nii mu ngi am léegi nii sax ñu ngi ñëw start ndax 86 li kilomètre road mooy Wuñaadu Kunte Hakalang boobu noonu it's a very big project boo xam ne mu ngay ñëw start fii ak ay lii bu néew gis na time bu néew so foog naa daal lu bari mu ngi am tamit NDP bi tamit try na expand rural electrification li project bi mooy gox yi tam yëpp mun a am li courant Kunte am na courant ci nguur bi président moo ko jiite dafa am yéene ak itte développe réew mi lu ko dooree si yoon yi ndox ak courant lopitaan yi school yi lépp loo xam ne ni daal social amenity la social needs la loolu dinañ try ñu am ko suñ ko mënta am tamit si suñ biir néeg yi waaye duñu sori soo jëlee li nga xam ne nii nga téye ko ne yow yaa ko moom il faut nga téye ko nga fonka ko ba pare mu mun laa tamit njëriñ lii nekkul am si benn anam wala benn boor waaye lu ma lii daal mooy plan la bi nga xam ne nii plan yi réew mi la te pour naka la ñooy def ba mun a développe Gambia bi nga xam ne ni ñu ñoo ko moom si lu bari comme nu fi wax si courant si yoon yi si ndox si school yi lopitaan yi ak yu bari te gis nañ ne stana mu ngi am nanka kon loolu naka sant yàlla la mun naa wax ne mu ngi dem nanka waaw.
By the way, climate change is a development problem. It affects our welfare. It affects development. It affects our livelihood. There is flooding everywhere. There is disaster everywhere. There is warm temperature that is killing our birds. Our ozones are eroding. Our coast is eroding. Go to Nyomi National Park, go to Tanje Bird Reserve, go to Alahain River mouth. All of them are eroding unprecedentedly. For example, when we say climate change, we are talking about climate-induced problems. What are they? For example, land degradation is a problem. Somebody mentioned here, there is less productivity of the land right now. So we understand that we're dealing with climate-induced problems. So climate-induced problems also include poverty, because when land is degraded and people are not able to produce enough food, they're facing the problem of food insecurity and income poverty. So in order to address these things, we have to do woodlot and work with farmers, do introduction of salt-tolerant rice, do bee farming, do all kinds of things that will integrate to bring the biodiversity back. Because we know that only planting one type of tree is not going to address the problem. But we can do as much as we can, many kinds of activities that collectively will be able to address climate problems that we are facing. Here it's very hot. If you go to Kiang, it's less hot because they have good forests. We don't have the forest here. Right now, cutting the forest, there is no law that is stopping people from cutting the forest. Or there is no enforcement that is stopping the people from cutting the forest. So many people have cane saws and are dependent on the forest. What do we do in rivers? As Department of Wildlife, as Department for Conservation, we have to ensure that we encourage things that will plant more trees. We have to encourage that the soil got the real productivity capacity. We have to ensure that our wetlands are protected. Our mangroves are in the water, we have the fish, we have biodiversity rich for our people to survive without disaster. My name is Kausu Jame. I am Senior Wildlife Officer at Department of Parks and Wildlife Management. I am also the coordinator for a project called Gambia Protected Area Network and Community Livelihood Project.
The Gambia National Petroleum Corporation is the country's national oil company. For the past 17 years, GNPC has continued to deliver excellent services to all Gambians, from individuals to corporate clients. At GNPC, you are guaranteed the best quality fuel in the Gambia. Visit our stations and stop by our auto spare parts store, where you can find petroleum and lubricant products, wiper blades, and many more. All these provided without delay. With 10 service stations located throughout the country and still counting, GNPC gives you the best customer service anywhere, anytime. Think fuel, think GNPC, Gambia. It is now time to take ownership of what we own. GNPC, Nyokomom, the Gambia, our homeland.
Well, you know, anything I do, I want to do it well. That's one thing. But I am born in Dumbuto village, in a forest, live with birds and animals. One of my stepfathers was a hunter, so I know really a lot about animals and trees and forests. I was not a good farmer though, but I am also a community worker. All my life, I really want to do something that impacts the community. So whatever I do, I put that kind of notion in it. When you go to the National Development Plan and look at the chapter that represents Department of Parks and Environment, I am just telling you what is in this document. Because we designed this document in according to things we plan to do in the 3 years. And this is exactly what we plan to do in the 3 years. We want to change poverty level within communities that are surrounding our protected areas in order that we reduce their pressure on misuse and misappropriation of natural resources in protected areas. And by the way, our intervention is only limited to our protected area and our protected area communities, and also where we have serious environmental problems like Bintambolong, where there is land degradation. But otherwise, we are not everywhere in the country.
léegi man bu ma ñëwee fii juróom fukki at maa ngi simbe suuna gerte léegi boobu at yàlla yëpp tane na wante ñaari at yi daaw ak ren ni amuñ dara daaw sax moo gën a tane ren ñu ngi nii di door a am ndox amul sax weer léegi fu mu nekk nii coono ñëw na yooyu sa dund mooy mbéy moo lay yóbbu fekkee léegi nawet su ñëwee amoon ndox coono ñëw na borom njaboot nga tax xam nga ñun fu mu nekk ni léegi ñun waa Kuntaay yëpp du kenn nit de yëpp dañ sonn léegi comme que yéen ñoo ngeen ngeen seet naka la affaire bi di dem ñun tam coono bu ñuy dal ni du suñ sago ci loxo yàlla lay nekk yàlla moo indi ndox soo balaa ngay béy nga am ndox soo amul ndox doo mun a béy.
The department has interest in establishing a protected area in Jokadu because we have a biosphere and a core area in Nyomi that need to be expanded, and because of that we established a new protected area here in Jokadu, which consists of land belonging to Upper Nyomi, Jokadu and Lower Badibu. And because of that there are activities in managing the area. So one of the activities is to deal with sustainable livelihood projects, also to deal with problem addressing projects. For example, people living within this community don't have access to fuel wood and timber for fencing and firewood and roofing, so there is need for alternative. So the project creates an alternative of establishing a woodlot in Kuntaya that can provide the local people with firewood and also timber and also with fencing materials. So the project is established but belongs to the community of Kuntaya.
We had series of problems pertaining to firewood and timbers for roofing. Then what we did was we deemed it necessary to get into the forest or get into the bush and get trees cut to use it for our purpose. We've been engaged throughout, getting into the forest, cutting down trees, to use it for firewood, and also when it comes to timbers and whatsoever, we also deem it fit to also get again into the forest or into the bush to get trees for roofing and whatsoever.
The challenge is where there is too much pressure on the resources of the National Park of Jokadu. And because there is too much pressure, it's because local people need to meet their ends. As a matter of fact, they have to go into the fields, cut trees to use as fuel wood or for roofing or for timber, particularly mangrove. So we see it necessary to establish woodlots in those communities. This is the first one for that matter, but to establish woodlots in those communities so that pressure on those resources, we are able to reduce them. So in the long term, there is no even pressure in terms of going into the national park to fetch wood and mangrove.
Our main objective is to ensure that the resources are utilized in a very sustainable manner. We focus more on community development aspect. That is one component, and the natural resource management. So you've seen the headquarters of Jokadu National Park.
If you looked at the catchment areas here, Kuntia in particular, we have less trees because this was a normal routine. Every Tom, Dick and Harry can get up, get a tree fallen for no just cost. But now, with the intervention of this project, we are trying to restore the lost trees and whatsoever. And of course, it impacted negatively on our cultivations, because if you looked at, before you get good harvest, you need to get the rain that is required. And by doing so, you need also to get at least the appropriate trees, because no tree, no water, no tree, no life. So then tree is very paramount in whatsoever. So this is why we are very glad to see your intervention is within.
The reason why we are doing that is to reduce the level of poverty, okay? And like you know that the government is doing a lot to support local people. So as a government department, we think this is very relevant. To begin with some of the programs, projects or programs we are doing in the country, one of them is like restoration program. As a conservation department, we are doing a lot of restoration. We will be seeing some of the sites. We are doing mangrove restoration and we are doing upland restoration. And this farmer package is also part of the restoration program, because the farmer is expected to plant at least 20 trees. And this will be later expanded to other members of the community as well. So this is a very good initiative, because this part of the country, that is the northern part of the country, North Bank region, is very degraded and they are seriously affected.
When we had this intervention, we were being fully informed. It is not an ideal decision to do, but rather to do what we call this afforestation, in order to plant trees to be used in this posterity?
Well, woodlot is an area that is planted with a lot of trees. Not one tree here and another tree 5 meters, but it means every meter you have to get a tree there. You train them, manage them until they grow bigger, that you can harvest them in terms of compartments. Here where we are, we have six compartments. So when we are harvesting, we start with one compartment this year. Next year we harvest another. The following year we harvest another. Each year there will be a compartment to harvest. So it is on rotation basis.
The Gambia National Petroleum Corporation is the country's national oil company. For the past 17 years, GNPC has continued to deliver excellent services to all Gambians, from individuals to corporate clients. At GNPC, you are guaranteed the best quality fuel in the Gambia. Visit our stations and stop by our auto spare parts store, where you can find petroleum and lubricant products, wiper blades, and many more. All these provided without delay. With 10 service stations located throughout the country and still counting, GNPC gives you the best customer service anywhere, anytime. Think fuel, think GNPC, Gambia. It is now time to take ownership of what we own. GNPC, Nyokomom, the Gambia, our homeland.
In a protected area, most of our protected areas, we have wetland component and the terrestrial component. The reason why we are focusing on the wetland, because if we say food security, it's not only rice cultivation or maybe groundnut cultivation. We have the fisheries sectors. He made mention of mangroves. Mangroves, they are very important. I'm sure when we get there, he will talk more about mangroves, because mangroves, they help, in our fisheries sector.
nga dulanyin tanka pour mo kana nyamo fay jang andu mo kana mangol kuntu mo kana fem noringo bondi nang sate kono kana fe nan jang wala ka dimbata ka mala andum fana mangol nyim fana nyanta mangol nyi ntol fana ka mangol fana lafa no jande ni mangol ngaje dawda be fakan ton ka mangol nyine kana ka lafa je waya bay mangol nyi sa siano nyamen environment ko because fenjamal le bi mini yalan ko wol fana bi janna wol fana ke fam muna fam man ko nyinel like nyel mimbe ba kono ni wuluta ni jama bay ka wulu ba kono bala dende wala okay nim ba fa bina nyel ka dunnan karapol sipal bo la nyaama fenjama mi yalan ko ba kono living things wol ni wuluta be ka bolon dalle bay ni dunda jeron pour ke fam mala yandi je be mala yala damen drong maybe karkilin karfula nyaw kono rois na murum baba kono pour kana man to rosto bal bol milbe baba kon dolla siyo jam pour wolam ka environment o tanka nyama fay kana ke jang andum fana mol kana na jang kam mankol ta ke kuntu andum fana mo kana di ba mala jang yes dolla taw jang na fam wolati dal andum fana da fengol men bi jam fana mini yalan koy mo wildi ni ngeje nimme mutano on se tenkundino la ke dal.
Mangroves are very important. In the Gambia, we have 6 species of mangrove species in the country, and these mangroves, they play a very important role. In terms of climate change, they are very important in carbon sequestration. A lot of, carbon is sequestrated using mangrove, rather than, normal trees that you could see on the upland. So that's why we think mangroves should be very much protected. And besides that also, mangroves, they prevent flooding. Where there are mangroves, there will be no flooding. Mangroves also, they help to protect, violent winds or storms, if I may put it that way also. But besides that, also we can get a lot of food from mangrove. That is the oyster, for example. And the fish also, they are normally born in the mangrove. They will nurse there. When they grow, they will go to the, main river. So in the Gambia, because normally the fish, they use these 2 ecosystems, either mangrove or the rocky areas. We have very few rocky areas in the Gambia. We depend highly on mangrove. The fisheries biodiversity depend on mangrove. Being the manatees, even some of these primates, they depend heavily on the mangrove ecosystem. So we think mangrove is very important. Looking at the capital city itself, is very vulnerable to climate change. But because of the mangrove ecosystem, it can prevent a lot of disaster and related issues in terms of climate change. So that's why, as a department, we are focusing more on mangrove restoration, especially in areas that are degraded. So in terms of food security also, mangroves, they play a very important role.
Of us use it for economic gain. We have operators who entirely rely on getting timbers for this commercial purpose. And with this intervention, by cultivating this amount of tree planting, it will absolutely help, because next 3-4 years, we are expecting to get all here being ticked with Malana trees. So this is something that will just happen in a short while. In the near future, we all expect to have here a very thick forest, and it is entirely done by Department of Parks and Wildlife. So I think this is, your intervention here is timely, is being embraced, appreciated by not only Kuntia, but even the surrounding of this place.
We know that trees contribute to sequestration of carbon. If we have 20,000 Malinus trees in one plot of land, that means that is sequestrating a huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere. And if such a project is replicated in all the communities, this is 2 hectares. If we can have it in all the 17 communities, that means we will have a lot of carbon to sequestrate.
Some part of this area, they use this cow dung as a source of firewood. Now here, if we have these trees, of course, we will no longer hazard on using this dump as a source of fire. It's not helpful, it's not healthy, because the smoke that it brings out is not even advisable, because you could contaminate so many things in it, and it's not even hygiene. To me personally, I don't see it as something that should be cherished or should be healthy.
When we go to the other area, we will tell you our intervention in the farmlands. This, by the way, is a woodlot, but we are also intervening in all degraded areas, including mangrove areas, including farmlands, and we have our own techniques of how we work with individual farmers to get these things happening. But really, we're trying to address the climate-induced problems.
And we've come to the field also to talk to some of the farmers or the local people that are around here. So we are doing a lot of livelihood and biorite projects for these local communities dwelling around these protected areas.
Teto farmer rural Jokadu Dashland National Park. Okay, science dimba member mo anin fulalam. Wallel be depend in the camp. Sai kabrinda wuluta mbesheno lokon. Ndebita moto karang la wato menna mfama che bantal ntata sanji kilindo ye murundina sai mfama natna ban dimba be bentel la maroko sai kabri UNDP ye nyindina sai lafta nyina la national bulo e tala tia do kuola ngad depend kankango nyindo kankango nyi atle profito soto din tiobe tembe damento sai ni ya shena ashiata e buka maketo soto e ba wafila dame fo ya pudar leng ya landi mole bona mane yena yela e fansunda foye.
Well, we are in an agroforest project. It's also part of the PAN project, supported by the PAN project. The idea about initiating a PAN project is part of our sustainable livelihood activities, but also contributing to restoration of degraded areas, because we consider this region as an area that doesn't have vital ecosystem and needs to be restored, not only in the wetlands, but also in the farmlands and in the forest land. So, and many of the areas that we call degraded in this area, in this region, is within the farmland. So we decided to do projects that will support restoration of farmlands, so that the end result of sedimentation and erosion into the wetlands is we are able to control it, but at the same time promoting productivity of the soil and also promote reducing income poverty and promoting the sustainable livelihood of people living within. So the idea has a kind of multiple purpose. And because of that, we selected 15 farmers from 15 different villages. We are in Joka, we have 5 farms right here. So what we do is provide fencing materials for them, provide water facility for them, and also give them a kind of approach that they have to do when they utilize this land. That is, they can cultivate anything, but the policy is that they must have 20 trees planted within this 1 hectare area. And also they can plant anything, vegetables and any other thing, to be able to meet their ends. If they are unable to plant everywhere, they can invite their neighbors. Because it could have been a community property, community farm, but it's not going to work. We have tried it. I've been in this work for 27 years and working with communities and doing a lot with communities, both for NGO and for government. I realized that what is going to work for me is to look for champion farmers who are already doing it, so we can support them to contribute to those environmental benefits.
Yena yela e fansunda foye bari nyindu ninga do ko ci jang ale ma koy e molel mina jang men be gadin fawn nyina wolel mina jang men tawnde jabonte kakumbante abbe maketo be jan Gambia janne say adi momen na sante mba folo la sharola watermelon mbolo kumashla ninga do ko fenga mina ni machine na ni na suo nyi sai wala ba hula ngabe lebuluni ngana sharofi ninga sharofi sai to ko be mbul ni sharo kata no banda mbe jabo cela nga menta tomato ce nga kakumba ce nga jato ce nga patan shawci barata ceno lan kilinti nin kilin ko mba cela kankan nyimbe fellan ndum wontan tol bela ngani yote kankan la felo wontan tol la ngani yote anin kaus abe sunna alalla do ko wala.
The Gambia National Petroleum Corporation is the country's national oil company. For the past 17 years, GNPC has continued to deliver excellent services to all Gambians, from individuals to corporate clients. At GNPC, you are guaranteed the best quality fuel in the Gambia. Visit our stations and stop by our auto spare parts store, where you can find petroleum and lubricant products, wiper blades, and many more. All these provided without delay. With 10 service stations located throughout the country and still counting, GNPC gives you the best customer service anywhere, anytime. Think fuel, think GNPC, Gambia. It is now time to take ownership of what we own. GNPC, Nyokomom, the Gambia, our homeland.
But by selecting crops, what we want is mixed cropping. You can have trees, between the lines you can have bananas somewhere, you can grow onion, you can grow Irish potato. It depends on what you think is marketable and what can give you money. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to impose on you, or okay, you will put beans right here. No, it depends on what is marketable in your region and what you can make, what can give you a lot of money. So in this particular region, planting onion can give them a lot of money. We are aware of that. So hopefully we think that the farmer is going to do a lot of onion farming mixed with other kind of cropping. But we are encouraging mixed cropping, discouraging deep tillage agriculture, meaning we don't want tractor to come here and just, do deep tillage thing. What we want is a kind of tillage that is conservation friendly. You understand? And also we don't want use of organic pollutants like chemicals. We want you to use organic manure. So there are principles that they have to follow, and by following those principles, they will contribute to environmental benefits, as I said, and they will be able to make a lot of economic gain for themselves. There's nothing they're going to return to us. We are giving them this because they give us a park. These are all benefits they are driving because they live within a protected area community. If you look at human being and his environment, the linkage starts from there. We are human beings, we depend on biodiversity to survive. Land, water, forest, and oxygen. All these things are a combination of the ecological system. That's why we deal with biodiversity, which means ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity. That's why we have a protected area approach, because protected area is an ecosystem that provides all those goods for them. But if the community is really very poor and their pressure is destroying the community, the protected area, we have to walk out of the protected area, come to the community and try to develop the community. In a way, economically, environmentally, socially, health-wise, anything is part of conservation. So our linkage is, since we deal with human being, anything that affects human being is just part of our approach. That's why we work with agriculture. We have a memorandum of understanding with the NEMO project. They support a lot of our activities. We have the same kind of approach with Navy and other fisheries and many other organizations or institutions in the country. But whether or not we have that agreement with them, we are still obliged to deal with issues that affect communities dwelling around our protected areas.
People around Bara, and we have a park there called Nyomi National Park. They experience flooding every year. Flooding is a problem, and like the previous speakers mentioned also, we are having a lot of coastal erosion. These coastal erosions, they don't only affect the people, but they also affect the biodiversity, because like the marine turtles, they nest around that coast. And as a country, we depend on tourism and ecotourism, or if I may put it, tourism in general. We depend highly on tourism. And because of that, we have to protect some of these species. That is one aspect we are concerned with. Secondly, we are part of many conventions. As our department is the focal point institution for Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Migratory Species, Ramsar Convention, that is wetlands of international importance. We are also on CITES also, that is international trade and on endangered species. So you see, as a country, we are also party to a lot of international conventions.
Because we have very good policies everywhere, but the fact that we are not implementing these policies effectively is the reality. Most of government workers are not motivated people. They are not motivated staffs. So they're not using the best of their knowledge. They are also part of the clique that is trying to struggle and survive. So that itself is a setback for us as people of a country. We have this knowledge. We all know what is wrong, and we all know what is right. Talk to anyone. You will understand that all of us know what is wrong and what is right. But who is going to do it right? The reality, the condition behind is the condition you try to settle. So that's why as conservationists, we really think about the long term. What do we do to be able to maintain this biodiversity that is blessed to us? How do we really stop people from destroying it? It's very difficult. Who is able to buy a cane saw? Very powerful person. It is not less than $40,000. So a layman cannot get that money. So the most powerful ones among us, are the ones who are destroying what belongs to all of us. And by the way, we have a tradition of people coming from everywhere and going into our forest and cutting our forest because we term it as an open access resources that belong to no one. Sometimes even government work, we think, government work is nobody's business. So we are more self-centered than community-centered. That's our problem in our country. That's why this agenda we are in now, we think that when we deal with individuals, we can make more success than when we deal with communities. It could have been a community farm, but it's not going to work. But if it's an individual farm, this man will do everything to keep this. He will do everything to succeed. So that's the kind, I think it has something to do with our tradition and all other things.
Alala do ko lawat. Bari ñine be ngan yoto ka kata faliaje ko aliyem mendinna alfanan al kontan ayntol kontan. Nuwo ceta ibaje la do koto membe koma wol fanan safiro no bari na felta ata soto non. Sarakulol ko ni la cemobe santo e ka pudon tallulol ayji. So sa abe o nyamale te lafta kumo dan na jannata mbal konton na mbal jeyla al tolnal konton ala baraka baji.
Ñing problème o me yalon ko lebe dunia be torakan ta fo me ye climate change. Mandinka count on safono ikafa ko alhawa falingo because alhawa ka falinne bari a falinya atata sanji jamal to men yalon ko a falinya nata sangar kana mantoro nati ntol hadama dingol kan kuwo kuma wo sabu fo ntol hadama dingol fangol la Kenya na muna fangola alaye so fengol menna mbe muna fanna wala nyamen wole lanna tambita so wala na tambo wonata mantoro lantol kan so ninko mbe wo talala wo mantoro talala nyanta juberi kala mbe muna fanna fengol menna nyaadile pour kaje ko aman lanna tambi pour sama kama kudol bije menul bena sama wol fanan se munafango soto nuje so bari ning munafango lan tambita dron mantoro le kana so wo mantoro wole ning climate change sabu so pour ka kumo suti andi comme saing na balunya nyanta wole falinna nyanta na danangol marala nyameng asatara man lan na tambi ka ndanangol tanka ka jeko ntol si muna fangala sama deningol fanan si muna fang.
Our mandate is to improve agricultural production and productivity in this country, or come up with technological solution to the problem of our producers. We inform policy makers on that, the best options for that. So this is our mandate, and our strategic objective is to also participate or contribute in the attainment of national policy program or objectives of enhance household food security, increase income for the smallholders, and also to generally contribute to the national economy. If you look at the 8 strategic points of the NDP, the third one that says to transform our agriculture and fishery for sustained economic growth, food and nutritional security, and poverty reduction. You cannot do that. You cannot achieve success in agriculture if you leave research behind, because research is supposed to be if agriculture is engine of economic growth, as people used to say, then research is the lubricant. Without the lubricant, the engine is not functional. So you can never leave research. NARI is the entry point of all new germplasm resources here. You cannot bring seed into this country without coming through NARI. It could be catastrophic. We are the only people who have the capability of managing these things. We test them to our environment, local environment, and then we certify it. Of course, through NSS, I think you know about NSS, the National Seed Secretariat. When we have things, we are responsible for the production of breeder seed. Once we produce this breeder seed, we give them to NSS for certification. And this goes through a lot of processes, committees, and so. Committees have to endorse all these things to see that they have potential to survive or to do well in our local conditions.
So I'm one of the program directors in charge of the cropping systems and then the agroforestry. And then what this program does mainly is environmental crop soil related studies. One of our crop specialists that's Mr. Drame. They are the breeders and then the people who actually handle the crop from the basics. That's the screening part of it. Okay, but then when you're done with that, the crops also needs to adapt environmentally. Okay, because that's the essence. You need to adapt them to the different environments and then also to the different farming systems. Okay, so that's the end product. So that's where our work comes in mainly. Okay, we try to take these crops from them and then try them in the different environments to see how they'll adapt, but also to see how they respond to the different inputs. For example, most of the crops will require fertilizer. Okay, but then how much of the fertilizer do we need to apply? What times do we need to apply them? Okay, so those are some of the things. They need to adapt to these certain ecologies. Are they suitable for this kind of environment, that kind of environment? So at cropping systems, that's what we are focused on mainly.
Introducing a new crop, the preference of farmers, the highest preference is the yield. When the crops yield high, most likely the farmers are going to take it. But when it yields high also, the taste of the local varieties are much better than this other variety. It's also going to give it a big problem. So we put all these things into consideration. We make the yield test first, and then we do the palatability test and what we call the culinary test on station here with different people. So we take those results, and then later on we will select few farmers to conduct these same trials that we conduct on station here with the farmers.
Do the second year what is called a multi-locational research trials. Because when you just worked on a particular crop variety in the Yundum and Sapo, that would not give you concrete results to say, okay, this particular crop can perform in the Gambia. No, because if you look at this particular country, we have 3 agroecological zones. And in all these 3 ecological zones, the rainfall, the amount that they receive is different. You have the Sahelian agroecological zone that receives between 300 to 600 millimeters of rain. And then you have the Sudano-Sahelian that receives between 600 to 900 millimeters of rainfall per annum. And also there is the Sudano-Guinean receives about 600 to 900 millimeters of rainfall. That is where West Coast is situated. That's why we are receiving a lot of rainfall around this time of the year, because it receives the highest amount of rainfall. So the multi-locational research that we are doing, we ensure that these crop variety, before they go to the farmers, they are tested in all these agroecological zones, so that we can be able to determine in which agroecological zone a particular crop performs best. Then we are disseminating, then we can target those areas to disseminate these technologies. So when we are doing that during the second year, we would also give some of those varieties which we've selected with farmers for those multi-locational trials, for them to also test on their farms, so that they can also give us first-hand information, because those varieties are meant for them. So it would be good for us to also get feedback from them as to how those varieties are performing in their farms. So during the third year, all this process would be repeated to confirm as to which varieties are performing where. And then if we get to that stage, then our adaptive research is almost concluded. So our role there would be just to demonstrate good practices that we call GAP, good agricultural practices. So we will demonstrate those practices into as many communities as possible. So in that way, we will be also able to outscale, but we use the projects to be able to do that. So if we are unfortunate, projects have not come to knock at our doors, so what we do, NSS is also there, the National Seed Secretariat. They are mandated to do what is called seed multiplication. So in multiplying seeds, they would request some seeds from us. Then we will hand these seeds, those best crop varieties, which I just talked about, we will hand these seeds over to them. Then they would contract a lot of farmers, and then they will do what is called seed multiplication and give it to a lot of other farmers. So this is how NARI makes impact that then it would be disseminated to as widely as the whole country. So as long as the finance is provided.
Mango fruit fly is an insect belonging to the family of Thripsidae, which is a very devastating pest, and it is invasive. It has caused a lot of problems in the sub-region. It has caused significant mango damage, which is equivalent to $2.5 million per year. And this is what necessitated for ECOWAS to put up a regional project to help develop control strategies to help reduce the fruit fly damage on mangoes in the region. For the fruit fly project, it came into being in 2014, but NARI actually joined in 2015. We had conducted a series of research in both West Coast and North Bank region on the evaluation of botanicals and oxymum cannon. Different countries have different strategies, but for us we focused on the use of botanicals. We identified 3 botanicals that we worked on successfully, and then these were implemented in both in the West Coast region and then the North Bank region. The most unfortunate thing then was farmers really didn't know what it was. They were relating it to diseases, because once a mango is contaminated, it will, after 4 days, it will rot, and then they will think it is a disease, when actually it's the fruit fly that will lay its eggs in the mango. Then after 3 to 5 days, these eggs will hatch and start feeding inside the mango. And as a secondary infection, either bacteria or fungus will enter, and then the mango will get rotten. So they were kind of confused. They didn't know what it really was. And then also the main control method was they were using pesticides, which is also another problem of its own. As we know, it causes a lot of problems in the environment. It causes environmental pollution and human poisoning. Like any other insect, they are always existing within the environment. That is, they go in japos, they hide somewhere either inside the soil or in host plants, where they hide until at such time that the conditions are favorable that they will come out to do some of the damage that they will do on their hosts. So long as there is vegetation within the environment, they are likely to exist. They can exist for a long time. So with the mango fruit fly, it is invasive in the sense that it came from somewhere. They can fly long distances in a short period of time. They can be brought into the country by human travelers bringing small quantities of plants or fruits which are contaminated, because as we all know, in the Gambia, our porous borders are very porous. There are phytosanitary posts, but you can always manage to escape without them seeing. So it was noticed in this country in the early as 2006, And at the end of the project, we were able to identify botanicals that has the potential to control fruit fly damage on mango up to by 45%.